You know, I don't know if it bothers you the way it bothers me, but when I'm getting ready and I'm about to stand up and speak, he leads a song that starts out, "Troublesome times are here." Is there something subliminal there, or I don't know, but it occurred to me that that could be an issue. Well, listen, we did mention birthday, birthday celebrants for the month. Today's actually Peggy's birthday, so I want to let you know to go ahead and make a plan to stay after church. We're having some birthday cake. So we're going to mess up your entire lunch plans, and you can do what you told the kids never to do, which is eat dessert first. Okay, just think about the money we're saving you when you actually go to a restaurant. You've already had dessert. Also, I want to give Godspeed to Clarice and Jason. They're going to go visit all my buds from Brazil. I'm loaning them my friends that I've known forever. And so, you know, I'm not jealous or resentful or do anything. I'm a bigger man than that. And so, but, you know.
This is the contribution.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So we have a contribution to Jason and Clarice to help with those unexpected expenses in the amount of $575. Awesome.
Hey, Paul, and it's crazy. So our church on Saturday night did a small contribution as well, but actually this total with the contribution last night actually takes care of the increased expenses of going from the Airbnb that we were going to be going now to the hotel with the rest of the group that's actually going. So the Lord is faithful.
Amen.
I mean, because we weren't expecting that at all, and but He is faithful. He really is. Every time things come up, He always provides. Our flight got canceled 3 times. I mean, we're expecting great things because there's so much trouble. And you don't know, my daughter, she gets motion sick. She's never been on a plane. We go from here to home, she's crying, her head's hurting, being in the car. But, you know, we're going to fly 9 hours because He says so. And so thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I know that's going to be a blessing to the folks down in Brazil. So Godspeed to you guys. Today, here we go. Little different sermon today, right? It is getting out of our own heads. You know, you don't really think that's a biblical topic. But I hope by the end of the day you say, wow, yeah, that was like very useful to us. I hope so. My text is Revelation 3, verse 7 and 8. And you'll recognize this, for here he says, to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, excuse me. Oh yes, I'm good. I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Okay, that's our text for today. I want you to kind of park it over here because we're going to come back to that. We're having a literary exam today. Okay, let's see who knows where this comes from. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times.
Tale of Two Cities.
Sorry?
Tale of Two Cities.
Tale of Two Cities by?
Charles Dickens.
I got you, yeah. Well, you recognize the lovely Charles Dickens. Okay. And Charles Dickens gave us, you know, Great Expectations. He gave us The Christmas Carol, so many things we're familiar with. My favorite book is The Tale of Two Cities. Okay. And in that book, it comes from the French Revolution. It's a story of heroism, of sacrifice, of love, treachery, brutality. It has it all. But I want to take a page from his book. Very first line, frankly, in his book. And I want to share a thought with you today. You know, in the church today, it is the best of times and it is the worst of times. And what's interesting is that those two realities find a way to coexist at the very same time and in the very same set of circumstances. So let's look at that. Let's just kind of think about those two things for a second, okay? The best of times, the worst of times for the church. Let's look at it. You know, it's the best of times for the church because our message has never been so needed. Who would have ever imagined when you were growing up in whatever time you were growing up in, 60s, 70s, 80s, or further back, who would have believed that our country would be what it is today, that it would do and believe and practice and think what it thinks today? It's just beyond belief. Literally beyond belief. I think I told you at one time about one of my favorite books. The title of the book is "The Truth Has Never Been Stranger." And the idea of the book is what we have, traditionally acknowledged as true today. People act like you've got a third eye in the middle of your forehead if you simply recite some of the things that we've known have been true from the very beginning. It's just how much our society has changed. Number two, never has our audience been so lost. I mean, an entire generation has grown up unchurched. Think about that. All right? Never has communication been this easy. Never have we been this willing to engage. And then when I say we, I mean the church. When I was growing up, we went down on the corner at 7th Street and Avon, there in my little city, and there we did church, and we did what we did behind the walls of our church building because the only thing that was spiritually important is what happened behind those walls at the church building. We'd help somebody if we found out about it by accident, because we were swell people. Okay? But we probably didn't have the same servant attitude, the same connection to our community that we have today. And so the point is that we are more willing to engage than we have been in the past. How about this? We have never been this theologically aligned with the purpose of God. Which means we finally woke up to the fact that there is something to be done, and that faith is more than about salvation. It is about a lost world. It is about taking captive every thought that raises itself up against the knowledge of God, among other things. And so we ourselves are actually more, it used to be, we just thought we'd done it all when we went to church. When we did, 2 songs, a prayer, 2 songs, and a Lord's Supper, and 2 songs, and we've done it all. We actually are more theologically aligned with the purpose of God today, probably than we've been at any other time, for which I'm grateful, by the way.
Amen.
But then it's the worst of times as well. Okay? Because never in the history of our society has our society been more antagonistic toward the Christian faith than it is today. Straight up. Our society has never been this divided and this pluralistic, which means we'll believe anything. You rub a couple of rocks together and someone says, man, I believe that'll save me. Whatever it is. Down to crystals and, magic beans. The vine will grow up out of the ground and crawl up and you go to heaven. I don't know. It's just how, sometimes ridiculous things are. Our people have never been this ignorant of God's Word. We were raised in a city, we were raised in a country that, back in the old days, people learned to read out of the Bible. Faith has never been more maligned than it is today.
If you're a Christian in today, in various circles, you're a bigot, a homophobe, judgmental, non-scientific, morally out of touch, and irrelevant in the modern world. That's the narrative. Never in our history have the opponents of faith been so applauded and celebrated. And so, we won't say anything against that faith, but man, it's open season on Christianity. Just saying. And never has our government been this intrusive than it is today. I mean, I read periodically of people, hear on the radio or see on the TV, of people arrested for having a Bible study in their home. I think, man, is this still America? I remember when I was in Estonia, we were welcomed into the school. I could go and teach the Bible in the school in Russia, but I couldn't do it in the United States. Just saying. Isn't it interesting that this is at the very same time, very same set of circumstances. It's the best of times and it's the worst of times. It reminds me of the story of the two salesmen who were sent to Africa, shoe salesmen sent to Africa at the beginning of the last century. The first salesman arrived, and to his dismay, no one wore shoes. You probably heard this story, right? And so he telegraphs back to the company, and he telegraphs back and he says, returning home, there is no market here, no one uses shoes. The second salesman arrives shortly thereafter for a different company. He saw the same thing and sent this telegram: empty the warehouse, send everything you've got, because everyone here needs shoes. So it's about perspective, right? The one saw, no one uses shoes. The other one says, oh man, everybody needs shoes. Here's the essence of the lesson today. We choose which of these narratives we will believe and which of these narratives we will reinforce. As we talk among ourselves, as we interact as brothers and sisters, as we go about this thing we call church, we're going to choose one of these narratives. Oh, this is the worst time ever. Or, man, this is the best time ever. We'll get to choose which of those we're going to accept and which one we're going to reinforce on a day-to-day basis. So is this the best of times? Or is this the worst of times? Have you ever heard someone say this? Don't worry about him, he's just trying to get in your head. That's kind of a thing today. I'm just trying to get in your head. Perhaps you've seen this before if you're a sports guy. It's like the weigh-in, the two boxers are going to have this big fight. And at the weigh-in, they get, toe-to-toe and eye-to-eye and tooth-to-tooth. And they're both, these cold stares. And invariably, one guy pushes the other because he's trying to get into his head. He's saying, I'm the aggressor. I'm someone you should fear. And so he shoves the guy, and the guy comes charging back, and he has to shove back for the very same reason. No, I'm the aggressor, and I'm the guy you need to fear. This fight is mine. And so they're both trying to get in each other's heads. Well, here's what I want you to know. Churches get in their own heads. We tell ourselves a story. We paint a picture. And then we reinforce a narrative. A story we're telling ourselves. What we believe about ourselves. Just to give you an idea, this happened recently right here at Midway Road. Midway, RA and I met with the leaders of the More to Life Church who want to rent some time and space in our facility. we've talked about this. Everybody knows what the options are, and that's about to happen. Now, bear in mind that the More to Life Church is actually smaller than we are, and they have nothing. And I'm trying to, they don't have any land, they don't have any building, much less a facility like ours that's essentially paid off like ours, essentially. And here's what they said. They said, we're a small church, but we sense that God is moving among us, and we expect great things to happen. I went, huh. As we would say back in England, well, bully for you. We're a small church, but we feel God moving among us. We expect great things to happen. And what really made that stand out to me, and the reason I remembered it, is that the very next day at our monthly men's meeting, we started with this question: has Midway Road hit bottom? Now, I don't want to make a big deal out of that contrast, because several men at that very moment, at that meeting, immediately refuted the idea that we were at a bottom at all. In fact, they said, no, I can tell you where the bottom was. And they described that. But what I want to point out is that one statement definitely came from a best of times mentality. You follow what I'm saying? It came from this best of times mentality, and it reflected a sense of optimism, of expectation, of hopefulness, of a group of people who believed in themselves, that had an openness to God and were readily reliant upon God, expecting the best. Whereas the other is gloom and doom, woe is us. And by the way, we are doing this to ourselves. You see, we're in our own heads, telling ourselves, reinforcing a story. We do that because it's easy to forget what our text today so readily affirms and powerfully affirms, to tell you the truth. Do you remember? We forget that it's God who opens and closes doors. And when He opens a door, no one can close it. And when He closes the door, no one... You remember the verse? I could read it again. Got it right here. You see, we forget that. And so we begin to get inside our own heads. Maybe get inside our own fears. And we forget that it's God who's the key to things. And that brings me back to Peggy's favorite verse from 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 12. She had it on the bulletin like forever, until we forbid her to put it on the bulletin anymore. And that verse says, Lord, we do not know what to do, but our eyes are upon you. Now, that might offend some people. What do you mean we don't know what to do? What do you mean that we don't know what to do? And they're likely to give us or give me a formula for growth or a description of what they had done in times past that saw the church grow. And I get that. I've done that myself back in the times when I felt empowered and assumed that everything depended upon me. But I have since made my peace with our eyes are upon you. And that thought process, I mean, when you stop and think about it, where else would we want to focus? Who else is the sum of our hopes? And who else opens doors that no one can shut? But, by the way, just kind of off the topic, To get a God to open a door, what do you think has to happen? Hello? Someone's got to knock. Okay? You got to knock. Which means that we've got to do something. We've got to make ourselves available. We've got to project ourselves. And we need to be focused upon God. We need to be trusting in God. We need to be reliant that God will open the door. Anyway, that was just off the point. I thought of several historic examples of individuals, nations, and churches that got in their own heads. I thought of Israel in the wilderness. You remember the story. Moses sent out spies into the land, and 2 of the 12 came back. And they said this: hey, those people are too strong, their cities are too big, their walls are too high, and by the way, there are giants in that land. Do you remember how they finished that statement? And so we were grasshoppers in our eyes. They got inside their own heads. And so we were in theirs. Truth was, those people were shaking in their boots behind those high walls because they'd seen what God had done. But when we get inside our own heads and we tell ourselves a story, it's no longer about what God can do and the power of God. It's really about the bill of goods we've sold ourselves. Just saying. And so, you know, the people of Israel in the wilderness got inside their own heads. And you know, the only 2 people of that generation who entered into the land were the 2 people who said, hey, God's blessed us all along the way. He gave us victory. He can do it again. Let's go up and take the land. Those are the only 2 people who got to see the promised land out of that generation. Hey, another illustration. You know, it has to do with David and Goliath. I mean, when you stop and think about it, David and Goliath, it's the same story. Valiant Israeli soldiers were cowering in their tents. I mean, these are guys, they were like Navy SEALs, right? These guys had been through the war. They had, fought the fight. They were valiant men of battle. But when they looked at Goliath, this hulk of a guy, they said, ooh. And so they focused on their limitations. And it took a shepherd boy to come into the camp with care packages to confront the giant in the name of the God of Israel. You see, they focused on their limitations, not the power and the potential of God. Even in our text today, the church in Philadelphia, I don't know whether you caught the comment in the reading. It was easy to it wasn't the main thing that was said. But it said this. He said, I know your deeds, and I have set before you an open door that no one can shut. Now here it comes. I know that you have little strength. I know that you have little strength. That's what God said. I know it. I know that you have little strength. And so here's the deal. So whatever came next in their story was not accomplished by their abilities, resources, or wisdom. What came next was accomplished because God opened a door for them.
That's right.
And that's the way it was. That's what happened. And so here's my rather odd conclusion. And someone says, great, another odd conclusion from Paul. There is nothing wrong with having little strength, as long as you remain focused on God. There you go. Now, isn't that a crazy conclusion? There is nothing wrong with having little strength as long as you remain focused on God. In fact, wouldn't it be tragic for a church, any church, to believe that it was succeeding because of its strength, its wisdom, its charisma, its strategy, or some winning personality within the congregation? You see, we just took all the glory away from God in the process. And yet, if we are telling ourselves, if we're inside our own heads, and if we're telling ourselves, you know, we don't have the strength, we don't have the wisdom, we don't have the charisma, we don't have the strategy, and we don't have some winning personality, we don't have the money, we're just reinforcing our narrative for ourselves. You see, if I read Revelations correctly, churches succeed because God rewards faithfulness with an open door. You can go back and read it, but I think I've kind of got that one figured out. God rewards churches for their faithfulness, and He rewards them with an open door. And if that is the case, wouldn't the best thing we could possibly do as a church is to ensure our success? Wouldn't it be to tend to our faithfulness? Let's get focused on ourselves. Let's get focused on our faithfulness to God. Not just faithfulness in attendance, but our faithfulness in prayer. Our faithfulness to the mission. Our faithfulness to confide that God is able to open the door. Faithfulness in reaching out into our community. Faithfulness in the priesthood that God has given us to impact the lives of others as we serve and intercede for them, advocating for them in their failure. I think that's the conclusion, right? If God rewards churches with open doors as a result of their faithfulness, then our very best formula is to take care of that piece of business. Make it our business to be faithfulness. So it isn't the strategy, it isn't the numbers, it isn't the money, it is our faithfulness. Or saying it differently, our fullness of faith. And that's the piece we need to take care of us. Seems like that all adds up. Seems like that's the way it ought to work. And so when it comes to faith, mission, church, I want you to know right now, someone wants to get in your head. Someone wants to get in your head. Whenever you start thinking about faith, or whenever you start thinking about church or mission, someone wants to get into your head. The first person that comes to mind is Satan. He's trying to get into your head. You see, Satan is going to tell you, hey, this is the absolute worst of time. Our society has never been more antagonistic. Our faith has never been more maligned. Never in history have the opponents of faith been so applauded and celebrated. Our government has never been more intrusive. Oh, and by the way, you have little strength. So what's the point? No one cares. And you see, we can take that at face value as Satan whispers that into our ears. Then there's God. You see, God wants to get into our heads. He's wanting us to understand and believe that these are the best of times. He wants us to know that He does His best work when people understand that they have little strength. Because I guarantee you, when the Bible says that Satan is in the streets like a roaring lion waiting to see who he can consume, when he speaks to him as the prince of this world, and when he speaks of him having dominion and power and angels, I want you to know we have little strength on our best day. With whatever resources we can gather, with all the resources. God wants us to know that He does His best work when His people understand that they always have a little strength, and He is always the one who opens the doors. It isn't about the wisdom. It isn't about the strategy or the resources. It's about the faith. And yes, we need to get out of our own heads, and we need to get into God's head and trust God to open the door if we will just be faithful in all that He is. And so this morning, the question is not, do we have a lot of strength? Do we have a lot of resources? Do we have a lot of talent? The question is, will God reward our faithfulness with an open door? And I'm going to tell you, God does His best work when people recognize that they have little strength. Whatever happens from here will happen because God opens the door. And by the way, doesn't it seem like God's been doing a lot of that lately? This morning, I want to encourage you as an individual. I want to encourage you as a church. Get out of your head. Just get out of your own head. And let's trust God. Let's focus on our faithfulness. Let's trust God to open the door that He wants to open. Don't sit down as we stand and sing.